Hey, you two. So, as you've probably heard by now, Gavin Grimm's case was going to be heard by the Supreme Court, but no longer will, as the Supreme Court has decided to send that back to the Fourth Circuit. And so a lot of people have asked, what does that mean for the case, for trans rights, things like that? And the answer is, it doesn't change a ton other than the fact that we don't have a clear decision from the Supreme Court. But that doesn't necessarily mean that trans people aren't protected by the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause against sex-based discrimination, because we are. And so let's go into the weeds a little bit with the case, and then we'll discuss why trans people are actually already protected by the Constitution. And so basically what happened in Gavin's case is that the Fourth Circuit deferred largely to the Obama administration Department of Justice, Department of Education guidelines that said Title IX meant that, which is the provision that protects students against sex-based discrimination in educational environments. They took the position that Title IX already protected trans students, and this is how, to avoid potential lawsuits, school districts and other entities should implement trans bathroom guidelines. And so what you've had in several different district courts around the country are court rulings saying that very same thing, that trans people are protected by the Constitution, and that sex-based discrimination includes aspects of identity like gender identity, because critics of that position, whether you are the court in Texas, where the Texas AG filed the injunction against Obama guidelines, critics that filed amicus briefs against Gavin's position, who tried to misgender him deliberately and got told by the Supreme Court, no, you must refer to him with male pronouns. They're going to try to make the argument that sex-based discrimination, that sex is not something you can redefine. But that requires them to make the argument that it is based off of something like chromosomes or reproductive capabilities or something else like that. And even a birth certificate isn't potentially a really strong, compelling argument for it. And so if all of a sudden the conversation about what defines sex has to be broadened and expanded, and it does, because you've also had court cases and court rulings in favor of non-binary and intersex individuals who have challenged basically the legal sex binary. And so if the legal sex binary suddenly becomes at least a matter of debate or question, then certainly the idea that some traditional definition of sex, which is really just what the conservatives or anti-trans people want to use, is perhaps not the most accurate one or even a correct one. And that is what trans people have been arguing, and what the medical community has tried to point out, is that the sex you're assigned at birth, the one that shows up on your birth certificate usually, is based off of what people see. There is no test. There is no defining characteristic that wouldn't exclude some portion of cis women or cis men from the definitions of man and woman. So how can you exclude trans people from that very same definition? How can you exclude them from enjoying the rights that every other American enjoys? And so this is why I think that while it would have been nice for the Supreme Court to issue a ruling stating that Gavin Grimm is indeed a boy or a young man and is entitled to use the same bathroom that all other men are, because otherwise that would be sex-based discrimination, we're just going to have to wait a little bit longer for the Supreme Court to do that, or for people to quit trying to discriminate against transgender people for no reason other than their own personal bigotry.